Welcome to the fourth and the last in the series on Muslims in America that we have presented to you this semester. My name is Imad Houri. I teach in the International and Global Studies Department here at Mercer. My partner, unfortunately, could not be here tonight, but I want to convey Hannah Van's best wishes and regards for a successful event tonight. We do have a somewhat different format tonight than the previous nights that we've had. We will start with a speaker. I will introduce the speaker in a minute. He will speak for about 20 minutes, and then we'll transition to a panel. And the reason is because we're hoping to have a dialogue tonight. The whole idea of Interfaith is for us to be able to open up to each other and have a constructive conversation about our common interests and also ways, of course, of working together towards a better end. And so right after the panel is done discussing the questions that we prepared for them, we will open it up to questions and answers, and then immediately after the event is over, the Women's Interfaith Alliance is gracious enough to host a reception tonight in order to allow for the conversation to continue. So if you like to hang around afterwards and talk and continue to learn and listen to each other to each other and to other people who may have a different sort of persuasion of life than yours, you're welcome to do that, and it will be, of course, a perfect forum for that type of exchange. So let me begin by introducing our keynote speaker for tonight, who just arrived fresh from Atlanta traffic, as always. He is Dr. King. He's Dr. Mark Bilal King, and he is currently a faculty member at Morehouse University. I'll give you a little bit of his background. Dr. King earned his bachelor's degree in psychology from Howard University, and then earned his master's and PhD in sociology from the Johns Hopkins University. He joined Morehouse's sociology department in 2006, following 2 years as an assistant professor at Middle Tennessee State University. His current teaching responsibilities include introductory and upper division courses in the US, as well as African Family Course in Africa, the Morehouse Pan-African Global Experience Program. His research has been published and presented widely related to his specialties regarding issues of masculinity, race, ethnicity, class, status, religion, and family. And I can go on. I have 2 more paragraphs to read, but he's humble enough to accept a brief introduction. If you would like to learn more about his background, there is a press release that was issued earlier today, and you can consult that for additional information about Dr. Bilal. So without any further ado, please help me welcome Dr. Bilal King.
Thank you, Imad. Thank you, Mercer University. It's nice to be invited down. Sometimes you want to get away from Atlanta, and coordinators of this event put in a lot of work to present an opportunity for me to come and present a little bit to you. So just want to thank everyone for coming out, and I will tell you a little bit about myself. The title of the piece is All Presentations. I would like to change it, but I'm just going to leave it Interfaith, Piecework, Examples, and Ideas. I am a certified speaker for the Islamic Speakers Bureau of Atlanta and the Interfaith Speakers Network of Atlanta, and that's really how I was recruited to come and give this talk tonight. I do teach sociology at Morehouse College. That's my bread and butter. That's how I pay the bills, and I'll talk a little bit more about how that's also an example of my interfaith work. But beyond my day job, I have this night job. So to talk a little bit about my interfaith work and kind of why I was invited, I think. Part 1 is just what I do. As Dr. Houri mentioned, I've been teaching at Morehouse College since 2006, and I've been a Muslim at Morehouse College that whole time. That means I'm teaching sociology, which anyone who's taken an intro to sociology course, show of hands? Yeah. So most of you all know often sociology is not exactly friendly to religion, right? right? One of the first things you learn, Karl Marx, religion is the opium of the masses, right? So teaching students in that context while still being authentically myself is the beginning of my interfaith work, but it goes deeper. That's my discipline. I teach at Morehouse College, which started as a Baptist seminary school, training theologians, right? Serving, it's a historically black college, and HBCUs generally have a majority black enrollment, and African Americans are fairly Christian people. See, right? So Christian identified, even those who aren't particularly practicing Christian, typically the family is associated with the church, if not involved in the church, and the background has gone through a Christian period in many cases for the last 200 years. So I'm sort of walking in this space as a religious other, potentially, but I have more. We're in the Bible Belt. And Morehouse College does do a lot of recruiting from the region, right? And so I know that I'm in the Bible Belt, although being in Atlanta is not quite like being in Macon or some other parts of North or South Georgia. My family's from Tennessee and Mississippi, so I'm talking about knowing some areas where it's not quite like Atlanta in my own life. But then the final piece is I started doing all this after 9/11, when a lot of imagery lands in people's living rooms to focus on one element of a Muslim reality, but hardly the Muslim reality, right? So my own work every day for the last 10 years has been a constant sort of trying of my skills at doing interfaith. And I'll talk a little more detail about some of the groups, because I'm a sociologist, is what we do. We talk about groups. Some of the groups, right, that I have to kind of balance and help get messages to and be able to be in dialogue with without a shutdown. One is parents. Most of the parents who send their young people to Morehouse College are practicing Christians, and they would like their child, who they tried to raise as a practicing Christian, to stay a Christian. Meanwhile, the students go to college to leave it behind, right? Or at the very least, to experiment and adventure with their identities and their beliefs, right? So it gets really, really tricky because I'm not quiet about my identity. While I don't put it on people, I'm not shy about it. I don't keep it in the closet. Students do ask me, if they have questions, they will ask me, Dr. King, I'd like to go visit a mosque. Can you give me a suggestion, right? And so now I'm immediately put in an interesting situation, because if the parents call me 4 years later and say, why is my son Muslim, right? I did. So one of my first things that I've learned to do is I say, well, what denomination did you grow up in? Typically, they grew up in a Baptist background. And I'll tell them, have you ever been to an Orthodox church? Right? Have you ever stepped into just the diversity that's within the Christian faith umbrella, right? And I point them in that direction. I say, have you ever been to a synagogue? Do you know the different types of Jewish community, right? So I give them an orientation towards a broader religious knowledge quest. And I tell them to start off, just learn the information, learn how people understand their faith and how they walk their faith. And, hopefully if they come back to me, it'll be after they graduate. So, but in the classroom, I'm a sociologist, and we get to talking about groups, and we talk about current events, and invariably, right, questions about Muslims or questions about peoples who are Muslim identified will come up. And what do I mean by Muslim identified? Just like I meant by Christian identified, someone may ask me about something they saw on TV, I heard something about Arabs, or they may raise their hand and make a comment, and we're talking about India or Pakistan, and they say something about Arabs, at which point I have to say, that Indians and Pakistanis aren't Arab, right? And I mean, I'm not trying to be sarcastic when I do that, but it's a very common misperception, because, again, the mass media has done this work, especially since 9/11. It was doing it pre-9/11, but 9/11 was a big ramp up. So I have to do a little bit of work of teaching people just about the different kinds of peoples that we're talking about, and the different kinds of, for lack of a better term, Muslims, and the differences within, right, Muslim populations in terms of some Muslims aren't very Islamically oriented at all, right? That what they're doing doesn't reflect their religious ideas. It reflects their politics. It reflects, what happened to them this morning when they got out of bed, whatever, right? So we're all human beings, and the way Americans tend to be being socialized right now, we don't think of Muslims as human beings first. We think of them as Muslim first. So whatever they're doing has to reflect Islam, right? So a lot of my work at the job is just helping students to see Muslims as humans, just like we know Christians are humans because we grew up in a Christian society. And we're very familiar with, even if we don't know any other denomination, even if we only know the church we were born and raised in, we know that the folks in that church aren't all the same, right? And so just helping my students kind of come to that understanding to be able to apply that to other groups. Usually starts with Muslims, but in general, other groups, Buddhists, Hindus, like I said, Jews, etc. And that gets at the similarities. So teaching about differences is about teaching about similarities at the same time, because ultimately we're different in the same ways, right, as human beings. Now, in more explicitly interfaith work that I've done, this may have landed me on someone's radar actually. Last school year, I was invited to be the co-chair of a Muslim-Jewish dialogue in the Atlanta metro area, and it ran the whole school year. We had 4 sort of dinner and a movie nights, and the movie we watched was really focused on Middle Eastern and North African Muslims and Jews in the Middle East and North Africa and in Europe, right? And then it ends with sort of Israel and America discussion. So it's a really touchy subject to get those two groups in a room sometimes and have that discussion. I learned a lot. I learned a lot about kind of what to do. I learned a lot about what not to do. And if I were to kind of throw out some of the lessons, I would say, one, in these discussions, it becomes really important to think about the context of the people we're talking about. Being able to think about whether what we're seeing reflects the religion, the cultural group we're talking about, or cultural groups we're talking about, or in some cases, it's really neither one of those. It's really the corrupting influence of power, right? If you're looking at relations between any two faith groups, and one group is a political minority and the other group is a political majority, not necessarily in numbers, but in power, right? And in some cases in numbers as well, then you've got to tease out what you're actually looking at and what you're actually talking about. And over the last 1,400 years, this discussion could go either way, but most of the last 1,400 years, you're talking about contexts where Jews lived as minorities among Muslims, right? And so oftentimes, the film and the discussions were dwelling on these experiences that either were something negative that Jews had experienced at the hands of Muslims, or some amazingly generous treatment that Muslims who had the power to treat Jews poorly did not do, right? They made a different choice. And so that power context, though, shaped the whole discussion. And so what I came to the end of it to think was, what if we had talked about Muslims and Jews in, I don't know, places like India, where neither was the majority. India before Muslims came to power in India, right? China, where neither Muslims nor Jews nor Christians ever came to power, but these groups lived in the same country and they're interacting, right? The west coast of Africa, not the west coast of West Africa, you had some interaction. The Swahili coast of Africa, you had some interaction, you had some presence. Ethiopia is a really, really, really interesting test case where you've got a shifting identity of the entire population, or the ruling population in particular, but you've got the three groups in the country for a very long period of time. And so there's a lot of group interaction that you can look at. And you begin to learn that what I thought characterized the whole of the history of the relationships between any two groups really ends up being just a period and a place, right? That they got along pretty well during this period in this place. They had beef in this place, in this period, another place. But that overall, I can't say that one thing characterizes the relationship between these two groups. It starts to become much more dynamic. There's, right, antagonism and harmony, and it has to do with moving factors. So I found that to be a very useful set of things to think about as you go into interfaith work. And then I began just thinking more usefully, more generally about guidelines, right, ideas. One thing I thought about was just what is interfaith, right? What role should it play when we're thinking about bringing more peace into the world? And I thought two things, right? Interfaith work and dialogue should help us to know certain things, and it should help us to grow in certain ways. It should help us to know that the faith walk, no matter whose faith walk we're talking about, is an evolutionary journey, which means if I meet you in the first week of your journey, I might not be meeting the best representative of your faith, If I meet you in a time when you've been on a spiritual high, I might be meeting you when you represent it well. If I meet you 30 years down the road, who knows where you are, right? So just knowing that the presentation, the set of behaviors that you may see people who are devotees of a particular faith tradition can reflect a lot of things, right? Another thing to just know, and I think this helps us avoid fighting over things that we don't need to fight about, is knowing that there is abundance. We all believe in a God that can simply create, right? And so if God can create, then the things we fight over that we think I got to have because if I don't have it, you're going to have it, we don't need to fight over those things. Even, arguing about status, arguing about who's got more respect, we really don't need to argue about those things because there's more to be had. May not be to be had right where we are. You might have to go somewhere else. You might have to engage with some other people. But most of the things we fight about actually reflect a perception of the world as scarcity, right? Resources, scarce, physical or social, this idea of scarcity. So if we know that there's abundance, we're better positioned to have good dialogue and good relationships. Knowing that there's justice, a lot of our issues between each other, when I'm talking about different faith communities, when we have conflicts, sometimes it's simply a matter of, look, I feel that I've been done wrong, or you feel that you've been done wrong. But remembering again that we all believe in a God that is the embodiment and the source of all justice in the universe should mean we can let it go because God got it, right? That's the kind of stuff that as we know it on a deeper and deeper level, it helps us to let certain things go and not end up having needless conflict. Hence, we become, people who are working towards peace. And probably the final piece that I would say on this is, again, back to the God that we all believe in. A has given us free choice. Now, we may debate about degrees of free choice and the nature of free choice, and I think theologians in every tradition I've read about do debate about the extent of free choice and all of that. But that there's this degree of choice that's connected to this notion that you can either earn heaven or hell, right? You can earn, even in the faith traditions that don't talk about heaven and hell, they talk about karma, right? They talk about nirvana. What you do, what you choose to do is what earns you, right? The good and the bad later in this life, the next life, etc. So understanding that choice is a gift from the divine makes it a little easier for me to let you choose what you're going to do, how you're going to walk your faith walk, what faith identity you're going to take on, etc. And it should do the same for you, right? And the other piece is that diversity is one of those divine gifts, right? That along with freedom of choice, we've been given a world where things are different, people are different. And most of the scriptures that I come into, even teachings, religious faiths that aren't based in scripture, but that are based in an oral tradition or something like that, there's an understanding that the diversity, not just of the natural world, but of human beings is natural. Meaning comes from God, is going to be here no matter how much some folks will try to make everyone be like them. And then it raises the question of what are you doing trying to make people be like you, right? There's some tension. And again, theologians in like every tradition have had some healthy debates about how good an idea or how bad an idea, how far to go, the nature of evangelical or missionary or dawa or whatever word you want to use, activity. And the most interesting case that I've seen is actually what I learned from talking with my Jewish friends who told me that they said, in our tradition, we discourage you from converting to be a Jew. Like, we'll ask you, are you nuts? You want to be a Jew? Right? And then we make you wait like a year, right? So it was a very interesting discussions, whereas other traditions, it's very much like our job is to go out there and convince folks to join this community, right? So you have that whole spectrum, but in understanding that diversity is a divine gift, I think helps us to be peacemakers, right? Now, some guidelines. Those were just some ideas. These are more guidelines that I would suggest, and then we'll actually go into the conversation very soon. One, thinking of central figures of our faith traditions and the sages, right? The central figures might be, so if you're Christian, it's Jesus. If you're Muslim, it's Muhammad. If you're Jewish, it could be Abraham. It could be, but then there are the sages, right? They're the big time rabbis. They're the not just preachers but theologians, people of all kinds of sort of less divinely appointed and close status, but still very popular in teachings that are very useful that help us right, rise to our best selves, and not just their teachings, but as I'm focusing on here, their examples. And those examples, because there are so many of them across so many different social contexts, they help us to look to the deeper principles of the faiths and to study the rules, but to think about how rules are contextual. Rules reflect principles in a different context. So what the rule might be in this context, reflecting the principle, could be very different in another context. Both reflecting the same principle, but because the context is different, the rule can look very different. I think these are guidelines for thinking about our faiths as we engage in interfaith that makes us a bit more open, right, and flexible. A guideline is to be very much about analyzing our own communities. And I use the word analyze very intentionally as a professor, right? I may have grown up in this community, but I may not have ever analyzed my community, really looked at who's in, who's out, how did it come to be, how does it relate to other groups within the broad faith umbrella that I identify with, other groups beyond that. Understanding the ideologies and the theologies and the identities, right, within a faith umbrella can really help you to understand just how broad a Muslim, right, the meaning when I say a Muslim or Muslims do. It's very hard to say Muslims do certain things or Christians do certain things or Hindus do certain things when you've really analyzed all the diversity within your group. You find there are like 3 things you can say safely. Another piece is to learn every community's sacred history. And what's sacred history is kind of that period that we might identify with a historical period when that faith community views certain things as happening. It's like God was very clearly active in the happenings with human beings. And as a result, those might not necessarily be so open to analysis by certain sources. So for example, I turn on the History Channel and I see a million documentaries trying to find the historical evidence to prove that Noah's Ark landed here, right? That Jesus was buried there, that Muhammad walked here, that, right, on and on and on and on. But when you start getting into the sacred history, sometimes it's, especially in interfaith conversations, it's better simply to make sure that I know your sacred history so that I don't tread upon it with disrespectful feet, right? If I know your sacred history, I can use a language and I can think about what I'm saying and how I think about, that period, those people, and really cultivate a respect for it. And you can do the same for me if you're thinking about my sacred history. But before we can think about it, we have to learn them, right? Every community has them. Then we move from kind of stuff to know to stuff to do. And my favorite thing to start folks off with is just tell your stories and tell them together, right? When I turn on the TV or go to the movies in general, I'm seeing stories being told of a figure claimed by one faith community or other so that it's a telling of that community's story. It's very rare that I see interwoven stories about people who are of multiple faiths. And the story might not even be about faith. They might simply be of these faith identities, but dealing with political stuff, family stuff, school stuff, whatever, right? But those kinds of stories, I think if people who are interested in interfaith and in cultivating peace begin to do the work of telling those kinds of stories through the media that we have available, it's real easy to shoot a video and put it on YouTube today. It's a little more difficult, but still amazingly accessible to buy some slightly higher quality equipment, write out a screenplay and actually do something of a short film. So we have the opportunities to do things that help others learn the things that we've learned. And I promise you, I've been teaching sociology a long time. The best way to teach people is by telling stories. I teach Karl Marx by showing Fight Club. Anybody seen Fight Club? Anyone? It's not the most religion-friendly film, but, right? At the same time, it engenders a discussion about religion, and it very much illustrates certain concepts in the setting of a story that gets students talking and thinking, learners in general, not just people 18 to 22, students, right? Learning and thinking in ways that oftentimes my textbook just won't do. And so I'm a big time advocate of telling our stories through media in ways that are a little more sophisticated than, let me tell you a story about a Muslim and a Jew, right? Now, if you get to where you're telling stories and you're doing it well, I'm an advocate that people of faith can probably do some of the best work together by moving towards solving problems that whose existence really reflects. Now, the existence of the problem doesn't reflect it, but our shared values reflect the desire to address that problem, right? So when I look in the faith traditions, one of the most robust values that I see is care for the poor, care for the stranger, right? Empower people, make people whole again. And so when you identify projects that people of different faith communities can work together on that reflect that value, and then you do the talking afterwards, talk about how the work we are doing reflects our values, and then you have a much more rich interfaith dialogue. And that's not a Dr. King original. That's actually something I learned from reading and talking with people around a book called Acts of Faith by Ibo Patel. It's a really powerful book. He's an interfaith activist who did a lot of work in Chicago. He's still doing work, but he started in Chicago. I do advocate going global, which means thinking globally, acting locally or elsewhere, right? But always keeping in mind the whole global context within which you're working. I emphasize being careful about how we view people of other, not just faiths, but other ethnicities, other races, because we have a pretty bad track record the last few hundred years, thousands of years, of trying to civilize people, even if we don't call it that, right? We try to make them reflect our faiths, and so we call that helping them, but oftentimes we're not helping them. And so what I advocate is really getting to know people, getting to know what it is that their agenda is that they've set for themselves, and finding out how I can move my resources in such a way that it helps them achieve what it is that they're trying to do that empowers them, right? That's a much healthier way, I think, is healthier approach to helping people. And so my last bullet is kind of a restating of what I was just saying, which is, working on the socially vulnerable is what I think embodies the best of all of our traditions. And if you can, you work on systems, right? You don't just try to help individuals, but you try to make systems more friendly to the vulnerable. And if you must police someone, police the people in your own group, right? People who at least verbally, subscribe to the same value standards and ways of implementing your values, right? People who are in different groups may not share that, and so policing them becomes really, tricky. And so I generally try to stay away from policing people, but if one must police, right, police the egregious violators in one's own group. Last piece, this is from the Muslim-Jewish dialogue, but I found it had some ideas that apply well beyond a Muslim-Jewish dialogue. It's a book that you can get online called Sharing the Well. If you typed in Sharing the Well in Google, you'll get the PDF. It's a good 118 pages. It was jointly written by the Jewish Theological Seminary, the Islamic Society of North America, and Hartford Seminary. These are all kind of groups that are really well known for their interfaith work, and they made it as available as possible, so you can that's a long URL, but I can send it to anyone who wants it. You could Google it, you could type in this URL, it'll come up. And another really useful resource that I've come across is the book I mentioned earlier, Acts of Faith by Ibo Patel. So I think I'm about at my 20, and I will wrap it up there by just thanking you for your time, and let's have the dialogue.
So we're going to transition to our panel phase. If the panelists would please join Dr. King up on the stage. And for the sake of time, I'm going to ask the panelists to introduce themselves whenever they speak for the first time. There will be two pastors, an imam, and of course Dr. King on the panel, and a moderator.
Well, this whole series really has been a very positive interaction between people of different faiths and traditions, really dedicated to moving forward with interreligious harmony in our community through understanding and also increased acceptance. It's been wonderful for me. Personally, I'm a member of the Interfaith Alliance. I do everything I can with my hectic schedule to make time and come to the meetings. I just love the social aspect and the learning aspect as well. We're going to have 3 questions that I'm going to ask. We have limited time, couple minutes apiece, I would say, for the questions. And we're going to start, of course, right here on the left side. And on our panel, we have Pastor Scott Dickinson from First Baptist Church of Christ, Imam Adam Fofana. Please, okay, I've got you in your right order. Okay. I have Betty Taylor from Temple Beth Israel. I'm from there as well. Many people see me together with Rabbi Schlesinger. That's because I'm his wife. So I'm out there. I tag along for a lot of things. Pastor, now I'm going to do Dr. Mark Bilal King from Morehouse College, and then Pastor Marilyn Tucker from Forsyth Presbyterian Church. Okay. Now, the first question is a real earful, so listen carefully, okay? Despite recent trends and appearance, religion has been a force for much good in the world, both in contemporary times and in historical terms. Realistically, while we must acknowledge that religion is part of the problem, by the same logic, it has to be part of the solution as well. What opportunities do you see for local communities of faith to work together? Start with you. Okay, Scott.
Evening.
No.
Well, I'll just speak up.
Is that one working?
My congregation probably wishes this happened most Sundays. Okay, I think we're good. All right,
Okay.
There we go. That's all it took. Well, good evening. I'm Scott Dickinson, pastor of First Baptist Church of Christ downtown, Macon here, and I'm honored to be on this panel and to be back with Imam Fofana. We were up here for the first event of this series, which was great, and it's good to be back. This question is a lot, and my first thought actually was, for me it's even problematic to talk about, this way of speaking about religion as being part of the problem, and so it needs to be part of the solution. I mean, religion and religious people are so vast and varied and in our own experiences, and so I think we have to be careful about talking about religion as this kind of thing that we can grasp a hold of, or even tell, listen, you're part of the problem, we need you to be part of the solution. So from my perspective as being a leader of a religious community, it's more helpful for me to ground it in what can we, let's be honest about how we as members of a religious community, and our religious community, have been a part of our societies, our communities, larger communities, both of communities of faith, but also citizens of local governments and of course this country. Be honest about our histories, our shared history with that, and how we perhaps have fallen short of our own religious teachings, which is usually the case when we talk about social ills. But also, being honest and hopeful about the ways that we can do good. And that's been really hard, I think, in recent years, because it feels like religion in general has taken a beating. Religious communities have taken a beating. Marginalized, I think, in some ways, even though I think, depending on whose report you're reading, the statistics can be massaged in any number of ways. But, we hear declines. I can speak of from my own Christian faith, of the decline of congregations and of those communities. We feel that in our own way, of course, at First Baptist, like so many churches. And so there's this feeling of the world kind of not just collapsing or uniting against the church, but almost kind of, forgetting us or not acting as if we have any kind of constructive role to play. And maybe that is certainly from the church's own failings, certainly in religious dialogue, but in any number of social ills. I guess what I'm trying to say is, I think we need to be, as people of faith, both honest about our histories, but hopeful, as I loved how Dr. King talked about, we believe that God is just, and believe that God has a dream for the world, and that it is good, and that's kind of fundamental to our faith. And let's let go of some of that anxiety about decline and demise and all of that. As far as here in Macon, and I know I need to get to that, this series of events, my goodness, has been, I think, fantastic from a attendance point of view. The Women's Interfaith Alliance, who's hosting the reception, has been, I think, a tremendous voice. Has been around for years, and that's great because those relationships have already started to have been built when we really need them now. And I'll say, at least from our congregation's part, or for our part, we'll be hosting an event next Monday at 7 o'clock, specifically geared towards members of Christian faith communities, but open to the entire community. It's called What Christians Ought to Know About Islam. And we're excited to welcome a visiting professor to the McAfee School of Theology. Dr. Alam is actually in attendance here, who will come and speak and talk with Rob Nash, the interim dean at McAfee, have a guided conversation, and we'll do that over a dessert, which I think is important too. Let's break bread, or at least cake and brownies together.
Thank you. Is your mic working?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much for inviting me and be part of the final stage of this dialogue. I want to express my gratitude and thanks, first of all, to Mercer University, who have been tremendous in opening up the door for us. Last semester, I taught with your husband, Rabbi Larry Schlesinger, teaching Judaism and Christianity from rabbi and imam. That was very unique. And not only that, having this dialogue here, this is the number 4 in series, and also Wesleyan College have invited me. We have institutions in place that are promoting this. Women Interfaith, different churches. Today I have lunch with a visiting professor all the way from India. He's here with Professor Mercer campus in Atlanta, and we had delicious lunch together today. And all these speak volume of what we as human together, what is our aim, what is our goal. And one thing I like to open my interfaith dialogue with is the statement used by the gentleman who was the chairman of the World Federation for Interfaith. And this word, I want to repeat it, and I want you to repeat with me. If we can go home with this word and try to find solution for it, it will help all of us. Are you ready? Please repeat with me. There will be no peace in the world.
Oh, yeah. There will be no peace in the world. Yeah.
Unless there is peace among the religion.
Unless there is peace. Yeah.
There will be no peace among the religions. Unless there is dialogue among the religions.
Unless there is dialogue among the religions. Yeah.
And here we are.
Yeah.
That's where we start. We have to have dialogue. Do you know how many Muslims are there in the world? 1.6 billion. Do you know how many Christians are there? 2.2 billion. Do you know how many Hindu are there? 1.2 billion. Do you know how many Buddhists are there? So we cannot run away to say, oh, religion is not a problem. We got to find a way to talk to each other. Now, if you take 2 billion, 1.6 billion, 1 billion, how many is left? The rest of humanity are just minority with us. We the people of religion. So we have to start where to start. In my own tradition, in Islam, Islamic tradition, we have a teaching in the Quran and also from our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which he said, don't go out there and insult your dad and your mom. And the companion said, who will insult his own dad and mom? That's not possible. We all love our mom. We love our dad. That will not happen. He said, well, when you go out there, don't insult someone's dad and his mom, because in retaliation, he will insult your dad and your mom, and you will be the one who insult your own dad and your own mom. Now, to confirm that in the Quran, God said, and I will read in Arabic and translate for you in English. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ولا تسبوا الذين يدعون من دون الله فيسبوا الله عدوا بغير علم كذلك زينا لكل أمة عملهم صدق الله العظيم. He said, if you believe in me, don't insult the idol of idol worshiper. This idol is not God. God, why will you tell me not to insult the idol? They are worshiping it against you. It's a wood, it's a stone. He said, don't. Why? He said, in retaliation, they will insult me. And if you love me, if you respect me, you don't insult someone else, God, because they will insult your God. So respect. If we could have respect for each other religion, for each other book, for each other, whatever we hold as a valuable, that respect. If you see any pastor, imam, rabbi, who blasts this faith or the book of this faith, he is a reflection on his own book. Whatever you say to the others is a reflection upon yourself. So what I'm trying to say here, the golden rule, do to others what you would like to be done unto you. It's in the Bible, it's in the Quran, it's in the Torah, it's all our revealed book. So number one, I will propose is that respect. I have two more points, but I will pass the mic to the speakers next to me. Thank you.
I was really surprised when I got the call asking me to be on the panel, because there is, I mean, I'm sure you know, there's no way I can substitute for Rabbi Larry. But I think I could say that, you know, the Jewish perspective on this is the same as the other panelists here. But what I did do is I discussed these questions with some of the members of our Women's Interfaith Alliance, of which I'm a member of. And what I say tonight is going to basically be a reflection of the Women's Interfaith Alliance. We're fortunate that we have this alliance that has been here for some time, and it's firmly established now, and it keeps growing. We found, though, that studying together and socializing together, while it's beneficial, it just wasn't enough. All of our faiths emphasized serving others. So we decided that it was time to work some service projects together. These projects have included preparing sack lunches for children at a school in Centerville. I think we collect groceries for, I believe it's 3 families now. We collect items for the International Rescue Committee, which Iman takes up to Atlanta. We also, last winter, we collected warm caps and gloves, scarves, and socks and put them into little backpacks. And then we gave them to Daybreak, which is it's a daytime community center that services the homeless. We were fortunate recently in that the Department of State brought to Mercer a delegation of gentlemen from the country of Georgia. And we were requested to sit and meet with them so that they could try to learn some things from us. We encourage every opportunity we can to have members of our group invited into congregations and groups so that those of us who are of minority religions can tell you about us. Once we seem to be this mysterious other. So if we come in and we tell you about us and we tell you about our traditions, then that removes some of that mystery. We've been very reactive to going out and doing those presentations. We also try to publicize our activities as often as we can, anywhere we can. And one of the biggest things that we've had a tremendous positive reaction to are the photos that we post either on the Alliance's Facebook group page or on our individual page and our congregational pages. People seeing women of different faiths working together, it draws a very strong positive response.
I'm going to be really brief because I had a whole 20 minutes. I think that teaching at Morehouse helped me to, in no uncertain terms, or has helped, I still teach there, in no uncertain terms, see where the faiths meet. And so I'm going to share, my answer to that question really is the words of Martin Luther King Jr., who said that right now in our country, and this applies to each locality in our country, the problems that are front and center, and I don't think anything's changed unfortunately in the years since he passed, or since he said this, militarism, racism, consumerism. That these particular evils, and consumerism is really very much connected to classism. Racism is very much connected to ethnocentrism and religious blanking on the word, chauvinism. And so I think that for religious communities to come together around addressing what some of our best doctors, and when I mean doctors, I mean people who looked at our society and said, these are the ills that I see destroying our society. So if the people of faith come together to address those ills, I think that that's probably the most important work we could do, and I'll pass it on.
So one of the things that you mentioned in your presentation was that one of the most important ways to share about who we are and to have interfaith dialogue is to tell our stories and tell them together. So I'd like to tell you a story. At Forsyth Presbyterian Church, we have a member who is fondly referred to as Aunt Joan. Aunt Joan recently realized that every Sunday morning I get up and put on the bread maker in the sanctuary so that as we worship, we smell the bread that we will then break as we share communion together. Aunt Joan offered to do this for me with Brendan, who is a 4-year-old and who has his Meemaw, his grandmother, is Aunt Joan's best friend. So Aunt Joan and Brendan got up on Sunday morning, put together the bread, ingredients, plugged in the bread maker in the sanctuary, and went back home to have breakfast and get ready for the day. Aunt Joan is a member of our community, but she's a professing Jew. And Brendan was baptized in our congregation. And together, as a family, they made the bread that we would break together. Aunt Joan doesn't worship with us. She's a good Jew. But Aunt Joan comes to our fellowship events because when she adopted a young man when he was about a teenager who was already a professing Christian, he needed a church home in their community. And she found a home for him where she was welcome to participate as a community member at Forsyth Presbyterian Church. When we tell our stories of breaking bread, of loving one another, of taking care of the needs of one another, and we continue to create those stories, we are living into the call that all of our faiths urge us to work for, which is to care for the least of these, wherever we find them. They're here in Macon, in Forsyth, in Middle Georgia. They're across the globe in different contexts, in different social and political situations, but they are a reality. And we are charged to work against that reality of anyone being least. So I think that is the most important thing as we seek to share together our faith's teachings and our faith's work, that we tell our stories. The second thing is that we feel free to ask questions. A lot of my congregants have said, we really need to have somebody come tell us about Islam, you know, like a Muslim. I'm like, yeah, that would be the best person to have come. Absolutely. We haven't followed up on that yet. We need to be ready to ask the questions. Of course, if you're ready to ask the questions, you have to be ready to be asked questions. So not only do we need to be able to ask questions openly and honestly, knowing we may make mistakes and offend as we do, and ready to apologize when we do that and learn from our mistakes, but also knowing how to answer when we're asked in return. So we have to know ourselves. We have to know the gifts and the blessings each of our traditions grants us. Whatever your faith tradition is, know why you're there. Know why you believe what it is you believe and why it inspires you to do what you do. And then be willing to share that in love, in brother and sisterhood, in faith, trusting that God, the God who loves all God's precious children on this planet, will bless that communication. So those are my 3 suggestions. We need to tell our stories, we need to ask questions, and we need to be ready to answer them.
For the next 2 questions, I'm already hearing, the undertones and the threads of the next themes, okay? So I'm going to let you recap really what you just discussed and expressed, okay? What would be the priorities for collaboration? What approach would be appropriate to solidify these interfaith relationships? I'll let you take it from the beginning, okay?
I saw it read recently somewhere online. There's 3 steps to respecting religions: eat together, pray together, and hold each other's babies. And that seemed to get it for me. And as we've talked about, this telling our stories, I think of course has to be a priority and is a really a beautiful way to get to know someone. But of course the Christian tradition and I would suspect the Judaism and Islam would say that there is power, there are miracles to be had in the breaking of bread. That's at the center, the very heart of the Christian faith is this meal where miracles happen. I think I hope it's not too cute to say that's possible outside of just a communion service. Praying together, that's powerful. To lift up prayers, and try to do so for all people in the room. That's a hard thing to do. It's probably something we do too casually, I think, probably in civil society and these kind of mass prayers at sporting events and what have you. But I'm thinking of actual people of faith asking what it would mean to pray on behalf of another person or to do that together. And then, to hold each other's babies, this kind of making each other, forcing ourselves to see the other as a person, as Dr. King said. I think those are, if we could do those things, we'd probably have a pretty good start.
All right. I will say we already have seed. We have Women Alliance, Interfaith Alliance, and one thing I want to see in the next few years is to see Men Interfaith Alliance here in Macon.
I was just going to say that since you mentioned it.
I want to see that. The Women Interfaith Alliance was born in the belly of Trinity Methodist Church and our Islamic Center in Centerville. But we want to see men also creating the same thing. And those 2 things can go hand in hand. There are many things we can do together. The last event I attended in Atlanta was about sharing Atlanta by different interfaith groups to raise funds. And they raised a lot of money. But guess for who? For homeless in Atlanta. People who we call homeless. We have many less fortunate among us. We all share feeling for them. How about if we work together to uplift them? But it has to be done in more organized way. That's number one. Number two, if we can get more media coverage in this area, talk to Telegraph, talk to 13 WMAZ, talk to Fox News, give us a short coverage, weekly, monthly, where they can see that these three traditions, especially three traditions, I will say other faith as well, but Judaism, Christianity, Islam, we all belong to a prophet called Abraham. And if people can see that these three traditions are Abrahamic tradition, don't think they are alien or they are, people who come from different planets. Isaac and Ishmael are the two children of Abraham. And our religion traces our lineage to that line. And that will be, so media will be number two, I would suggest. And number three, I would suggest will be, how can we be rainbow in someone else's life? Yes, we do help people within our own tradition. We reach out to them. But someone who's totally different, doesn't belong to our tradition, how can we be rainbow in his life to bring joy and happiness in the way that we feel in our serving God through the service of one of his creation? Thank you.
Again, I'll address how the Women's Interfaith Alliance has gone about this. From the very beginning, the Alliance stressed that we weren't about changing anyone's beliefs about their own religion. We were there to come together and learn about each other, to identify what's similar, to celebrate those similarities, but also to acknowledge the differences. And interfaith dialogue is about, or it involves coming together and learning together, building those bridges, forming friendships, growing together, and thriving together. And through doing all of that, we have formed a bond. It's a bond of respect and appreciation for each other that is just, it's a very special bond that we have.
I don't know. Really, no, it's there's so many different ways, I think, for different people to start relationships, that there's no kind of one prescription. The only thing that I tend to think of as a commonality is that people bond very strongly when they endure pain together. And all of our faith traditions teach enduring pain for the sake of redemption, not just of the self, but of others. And so in this vein of speaking about service, I think that doing the work until it hurts and having to be there to help each other make it to the finish line, I think that that's probably what builds those relationships. And whatever concrete manifestations that may take, that's probably the underlying thing.
I think my fellow panelists have highlighted, while respecting one another, loving our neighbor, and caring for the least of these, those are principles of each faith, and the miracle that can happen when we break bread, especially when we break bread with, not for, here you go, have it, but let me share this meal with you, with someone who doesn't look like you, agree with you, share your context, your history, your background, your sacred history, means that you're already in community around that table. You're already creating relationships and sharing the most fundamental human experience, eating food, taking sustenance, doing what we need to do to survive. You also mentioned that you can't have interfaith dialogue, productive dialogue, unless everybody's comfortable. And including more and more people who are, that is, raising more and more people up to be comfortable, to meet their needs, so that more and more people are able to join in the conversation, not to move beyond surviving, to thriving, to conversing, to sharing. I think those goals are important to all the faiths and should be our goals as we work together to care for the creation we've been gifted with.
I want to open the floor for questions. Anybody have questions here? Boy, we've done a good job. Anyone want to come forward? I'll give you another opportunity. Okay. I think at this point, I think what we ought to do is continue our dialogue at the reception that the Interfaith Alliance has put together for everyone. Again, to continue to foster the grassroots dialogue that we have here in Macon. Everyone go in, get to know each other, please introduce yourselves. And again, thank you very much to the panel. Excellent, thought-provoking. Have I missed anything? Would you like to come up?
Do we have a question?
Okay, we do have a question, okay?
This is a very difficult question for me to ask because it's something I don't talk about much in public, but I've heard a lot about interfaith dialogue. There's one group you didn't include, and there are people who belong to that group who would like to be included among those who care for others and who are interested in world peace, who are interested in the whole subject of diversity and getting along, and that's atheists. Where do they fit in? The atheists in this discussion have not existed, and I would like to know how people who also are reasonably moral and reasonably decent people, how we fit into that.
Do you all want to answer, or do you want me? Okay.
Well, I guess I can't speak for the
I can.
creation. You can.
Yeah, let me just speak for a moment, okay? Our group is really all embracing. Anyone who comes forward and wants to join the dialogue, we welcome everyone. Atheists, humanists, it doesn't matter, what your faith is, your belief system. Our doors are open. Betty, you want to comment to that, please?
I think what it comes down to is that we are all humanitarians.
Mm-hmm.
That's the bottom line. Whether you believe in a higher being or not, we all believe that we need to take care of each other, that humans have rights, and so we should all be humanitarians.
Same in Islam. Like I said, Islam teaches to be respectful to idol worshippers, and that's not Christian or Jew. I mean, people of the book, people of the faith. This was a pagan Arab who has no religion at all, but he said, they are human, be respectful to them, because your respect for them is a reflection of your respect for yourself. And therefore, any of these things, we really will open the door. Our mouths, our door is open all the time. We welcome everybody, especially in Ramadan, during the fasting month of the Muslim. We invite people to come, because in our congregation, you may have up to 30 different countries, and you can imagine eating the food from Syria to Lebanon, to Egypt, to Morocco, to Nigeria, to Indonesia, having all that on one table. I think no two people will argue that that is going to be a good dinner. So we invite people to things like that, and we have to open the door. It's not just dialogue. We have to mingle more. If we can meet each other in soccer field, football field, in hospital, in market, but not in the places of worship, that is not God. It doesn't reflect God. Thank you.
What he said.
So let me tell you another story. I'm married to what I jokingly jokingly refer to as a recovering Baptist. My husband is not currently a professing Christian. He also happens to be my organist, which can get a little tricky sometimes. But he would be asking the same question you are: why wasn't an atheist included in the panel? And he would also be asking, where is the voice for the voiceless? Which is what I've been learning to do as I read my faith texts and seek to faithfully preach them. Where is the voice of the voiceless in that story? And where is the voice of the voiceless as we, with rich cultural traditions in our faiths and a long history of strife with one another, forget that we also have a long history of excluding the people who don't adhere to our faith? How many people have been persecuted and pushed out of their communities because they don't toe the party line, whatever party line that may be? What's our history of exclusion, not only of other faiths, but just of people who didn't agree? And how do we begin to reconcile with that history and that story of brokenness, which is unfortunately still part of the human condition? So including all the voices should be a goal of any interfaith community and any dialogue, and I hope that will be a component of our future conversations.
Thank you. Any other questions before? Oh, okay, we have a question here. Okay.
It's a long walk down that aisle. I want to thank you.
Okay, we're going to do one more question. Go ahead.
Okay. I find myself wondering, I'm a spiritual director and was exposed to many different traditions. I'm Christian by tradition, but I find myself wondering if any of you are familiar with the movement of inner spirituality, and is that a natural extension of the work of interfaith dialogue?
Who would like to answer that one? Okay, there we go. Dr. King.
I'll speak to that one because that's how I came into Islam, and I didn't leave it behind. Now, I'll say that concretely. What I mean, I was actually practicing what sociologists call either cafeteria religion, because you just pick and choose the pieces that you want, or New Age spirituality. And it was predominantly informed by traditional African spirituality, particularly Yoruba religion, but it included chakra meditation, and it included sweat lodges, and so it was very sort of eclectic. And what happened was that I began to study the Sufi wisdom, right? Writings of the Sufi wisdoms. This is the inner spiritual part of Islam that many of my teachers and friends would say it's kind of hard to be Muslim without having the inner spiritual dimension. If you're only externally Muslim, only God can save, but we're not so sure, right? So I think that yes, in order to get past, this is what I was talking about when I said the principles, being grounded in the principles and studying the rules, right? Thinking that you're gonna have to have some rules for your life, but if you have this set of rules that creates a box around you that means you can only fit in square spaces, that's very hard to do interfaith work, because some people are circles, some people are ovals, some people are triangles, right? You get all kinds of squiggly lines. And so when you tap into the Kabbalah, the Sufi, the Gnostic, the traditions may have different names, but what I found is that they look very similar across faith, titles. There's this interconnection. There's a meditation tradition usually. There's purification of some sort, trying to get away from a lot of these external voices that try to present themselves as your identity and what you should be listening to, when the voice is in fact inside, although that's a metaphorical language. So yeah, I think it is very much interfaith is a call, interfaith is a call to inner faith.
Thank you very much. Let's all take a moment to thank the panel, please. Outside, the room here, there's a reception to the right in the, it's to the left? I thought there, oh, both, it is going to be both sides. Okay, we have both rooms. So please take the time to go in and greet and mingle and get to know each other. Thank you very much for coming this evening.